All right, to pick back up on the basilisk, I'm going to be using Lauren Green from Citadel to do some dry brushing. Now this is the same color, I don't remember if it was in episode 2 or 3, that I used to do some dry brushing on the top of the big gun. And I'm going to be confining this, of course, to the green area. And the goal here is not so much to really make the details pop out, but rather to do some kind of just introduce some modulation, some tonal variety, that kind of thing. You see that I'm working the edges, and it is bringing those out a little bit, those bolts and things like that. But I'm also working into the green color itself, just to vary that a little bit. And I'm staying away from the border with the tan, because I don't want to get too much on there. If I get a little bit on there, it won't matter, because I'm going to be doing the same process on the tan, and then later on there's going to be a brighter color still that's going to make these edges stand out. Now, of course, I'll do this on the whole model. I'm just showing this right here on this part because it's making it really easy to show it on camera. But the idea again is just to give it some variation, beginning the process of making those edges show. This is definitely a style. You know, there's a lot of different styles when it comes to modeling. I think that's one thing that I see that a lot of times people don't, I don't want to say they don't understand it. I don't know that they've ever thought about that there's a lot of different styles that you can finish a model in. And one style is no more or less valid than another. It's just depending on what your choice is for how you want to do it. I could have finished this in a very realistic style, a traditional armor kind of style. I could have done this in a more impressionist style, like you often see Japanese kind of things, like if you've seen the work of Ko Yokoyama and his Machining Krieger creation. That style of finish, you see it with Lincoln Wright too. That style of finish is very impressionist. This, I think, kind of crosses the line between them. There is some realistic elements to it. There's some impressionistic elements to it, but it's just a style. I would roughly refer to it as the GW style. But I think it has its own value. So if you see something that you go, well, that just looks weird, that doesn't look really realistic, well, look at it in terms of style. Is it a cohesive style? That can be appreciated beyond just, is it strictly realistic? So let me continue getting this green and get it all over the model, and then I'll move on to a lighter color of the tan. All right, I'm going to do the same process using Ushabti-bone. I like saying that, Ushabti-bone. I guess I'm saying it right. I'm going to do the same process on the tan area. And again, this is not going to be super high contrast. I'm going to do one more round of dry brushing that will add more contrast. This is just to, like I said, add some tonal variety and that kind of thing. I really like dry brushing. I mean, it has a undeserved reputation in some places for being a very beginner technique, and it is a very beginner-friendly technique. But I think it is overlooked for the great variety of effects that you can get with it. I have a bit of nostalgia for it because it was when I was a young young person modeling, probably 6th or 7th grade. My friend up the street from me, Steve, he was building a model for a contest at a local model shop. And they had a youth category, and he was going to enter this Messerschmitt 109F in it. And he built it, and it looked really good. Steve was kind of my inspiration in modeling. He was a very good friend, and he was a more advanced modeler than I was. And he was showing me his work, and he had this look on it, on some of the places, that I'm like, how did you do that? And he said, well, it's just dry brushing. And I'm like, I do not know of this dry brushing, or however I put it in my 7th grade English. And so he showed me how to dry brush. Now, he had done it for chipping and using, the tester's silver in the little square bottle, which, took forever to dry and was really bright. But, when you're in 7th grade, that's cool stuff. And when he showed me that, man, I went home and I started, all my models on my shelf suddenly had dry brushed propeller blades and wing tips or leading edges of wings and all sorts of details. And then I discovered, obviously I didn't discover it, but for me it was a discovery, that you could use other colors besides silver. And man, I started dry brushing the heck out of everything using one of those flat, cheap tester's brushes. But yeah, every time I dry brush, I always think about that a little bit. Think about my friend Steve. I still keep up with him on Facebook. He doesn't build models anymore. If he does stuff like this, he tends to do some rockets every now and then, but I think he did those when his son was home, and his son is now off at college, and so I don't know that he does model rocketry much anymore. But yeah, he helped advance my skill set, and it's a technique that I think is quite legit. Now, one of the things that I'm doing is I'm dry brushing on this tan color, this Ushebtibone, is where the edges are a bit scruffy, where there's a little bit of the green that's spilled over onto the tan. I'm dry brushing over those a little heavier. Now, I'm not trying to totally make the green disappear, but I'm minimizing it, because it'll just blur that edge a little bit, just feather it out a little bit, because I want it to look like it's kind of field applied, that the vehicle was originally a tan color and that the green went over it. And the next round of dry brushing is going to go even further to sell that notion. But this is a good way to just kind of blur those lines a little bit. I generally find that it works best to use the lighter color. If you've got a darker color and a lighter color, use the lighter color as your blurring color. It works a little better. The darker one will show up way too contrasty over the lighter color. But when you do it this way, the lighter color works pretty good to do that over the darker color. All right, I finished the dry brushing. Now I'm going to put some wash on it. My plan is to do a overall dry brush of Screaming Skull, which is basically a light tan color. And I'm going to do that over the brown and the green. But before I do that, I realized, I don't know why I forgot this. I'm old, I guess. I'm going to put this oiled earth Vallejo model wash on it. And I'm going to apply this fairly heavy-handed. It's going to act as much a wash as it is a filter. Now, it'll go on a lot more opaque than it's going to dry. I'm just going to paint it all over everything. It'll shift the color, but it'll also give us some panel line staining and things like that. Now, the beauty of this is if you work in sections, you can actually clean this up a little bit. I always say acrylics are an additive process, not a subtractive process. But secret between you and me is with the Vallejo model washes, you can get away with it being a little bit subtractive. Hang on. Let me hit this with a hairdryer and I'll show you what I'm talking about. Acrylic paints, when they're dry, are extremely durable. So what I'm going to be doing here is using some Vallejo model wash. And if I want to, I can just go into these open areas and lightly clean that up. Now, the reason I don't go over this a lot is this is a really quick way. You can tell I didn't let that wash get fully dry there. But anyway, this is a really quick way to mess up your paint if you haven't given it plenty of time to dry. I wouldn't use that wash over acrylic paint unless I had let it dry 48 hours to make sure that it's completely cured and that it's solid. But you see that while it certainly gave a filter effect, it's appropriately dirty and grimy, and it kind of blends things together, and it works well. If you know you're going to be doing this kind of technique, then you know you can shift your colors a little lighter so that they don't turn out too dark. I'm happy with this. I like this, especially here around the lower edge, where it's going to be more dirty anyway. This is going to be starting some of the weathering. But let me go on and apply this around the rest of the model, and we'll go from there. All right, next step is going to be to use some of this Screaming Skull. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to dry brush the whole model with this. Now, obviously, it's going to lighten up the tan areas, but it's also going to lighten up the green. What I want it to do is to suggest that the green is chipping away down to a lighter color, and I'll reinforce that when I do the chipping later on. But that's what that's going to do, and it's going to kind of unify it. It's going to cover up some of this staining, which I knew would happen. So it's definitely a stylistic choice, but I've done that before, and I like the way it looks. I'm going to dry brush that Screaming Skull on, and I'm going to just be lightly hitting it. I'm not really going to be bearing down on it. And I just want to impart some color on mainly the edges of the various shapes and on the bolts. So I think it's always cool when those stand out. So it's not a full-on bore into it heavy coverage dry brush. This is a more true dry brush. Well, I've still got to finish up all of this, but I'll go ahead and wrap up the video now. Thank you for watching this. This is a Patreon exclusive video, so thank you for being a patron. I am grateful. My family and I are grateful. And in the next video, right now my planning is to start getting into painting some of these details maybe, although I may put some decals on and do some other stuff and save that for much later in the process. I haven't decided yet. But there's a lot yet to come on this model. There's still got to paint the figures, still got to do decals, weathering, lots of little things, mud, dirt. So there's plenty of things going to go on with this. But thank you so much for being a patron and for watching this video. And I'll continue on and show you what it's looking like in the next episode. Happy day to you, friends. Bye-bye.